said, hey, we need to check. Said, hey, we need to check.
People is in the Caribbean not going to show up tonight. But
my hair okay?
Lovely.
Thanks.
Yeah, but your makeup's askew.
Yeah, it is. Well, I've had Zoom calls all day. I don't know about everybody else, but this is just, oh boy, the novelty.
All righty. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Boak, Chairman of the Kennebunkport Planning Board. It's a virtual planning board meeting. We're using Zoom conferencing format. The agenda is on the town's website. Information is needed for the if the public needs to participate. If you wish to do it on Zoom, it's webinar 882-2922-1535. You can also dial in by phone at 929-205-6099, and you'll ask for the meeting number and entered by the pound sign. So you can watch us on television on channel 1301 or stream us on YouTube at Kennebunkport Television. During the meeting, only the planning board and current participant will be selected as to be on the screen and audio connected. All other participants will be blacked out. Now, normally this is the point where I tell you how we do public meetings, but as it turns out, there are two. Everything tonight is an initial presentation, so there are no public meetings today, so it'll only be the presenters. So let me start with attendance. So Tom is here, Nina,
Here,
Scott,
Here.
Ed,
Here.
Larry,
Here.
George.
Here.
I think John is in the Caribbean or something, so.
I'm
Ooh,
actually here. I'm just
Oh.
not showing up.
Oh, he's invisible.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic,
Oh,
John,
it's
welcome.
Pretty tricky.
Okay, so anyway, the first item is approval of minutes. So we last met a month ago, so I guess we have some minutes from back there at the beginning of December. Has everyone seen them and read
Yeah.
them and such?
Don't we have two sets?
I believe we do.
Yeah. So they look good to me.
fine with me.
But you make
Okay.
a motion, Larry.
Move to approve the minutes,
Second,
both sets.
agreed.
Okay, so I'll check the vote here. So I'm in favor of that. Nina,
In favor.
Scott,
Agreed.
Ed,
In favor?
Larry.
In favor?
Okay, and that's good. Okay, so we've approved the minutes. Now, a request came to us through the through the town manager that we try to keep track of the number of people who are attending and viewing the meeting. Since if you were viewing this meeting, you wouldn't know how many other people are watching at the same time. So if Dave could
Oh,
give us the current attendance. Wow, okay.
Wow.
So the first item on our agenda is not Ocean Woods. Ocean Woods has entirely withdrawn the application. So we will not be discussing that this evening.
Tom,
That brings us,
Tom, this is Ed. Did we have a change though in the agenda? Has that been announced?
oh yeah, by the way, the final amount, item number 4, the Mills Road subdivision sketch plan, we've had a request by the applicant to slide that to next week, or 2 weeks from now. So that will not be discussed today. It will be discussed in a meeting in 2 weeks. So we just have 2 items remaining on the agenda. So the first item is 15 Langsford Road. Sebago Techniques authorized agent. So if you could bring in Steve and Ralph, and they can tell you if you have anybody else wanting to come in.
Let me, Ralph won't be there. So who I'd like you to bring forward is Justin Grimes and Philip Saucier. Philip is with Bernstein Sure. He's been involved in this project. Also out there, which we don't need to bring forward at this time unless you have questions, is Amy McNally from Ralph's office. Ralph's on vacation, so she's kind of pitch hitting if there's any questions that come up on the older application when this was a multiplex. So she's brought herself up to speed, but she's available if questions come up. Yep, I see that. So kind of a background on this is I think all the board members remember this project was in front of them back in 2019, 2020, when Lord and Harrington purchased the property and they wanted to add a porch to the multiplex building, larger building on the property. So we had to come to planning board for that. They also, there was 2 single-family residential homes on the property that they demolished and rebuilt. That was not part of the planning board review, but that was dealt with through staff. And those 2 units were rebuilt in locations that were shown on the plan that the board approved. Since that time, the new owners, 15 Langsford Road Owner LLC, purchased the property. They purchased the multiplex units 1 through 9 on December 7th, 2020. Then as the 2 single family houses received occupancy permits, they purchased those. So they were in full ownership by June 2nd of 2021. And then they operated the place as short-term rentals. And then the town, which is a permitted use, which is an allowed use in the Cape Porpoise zone, the short-term rentals. And the town had some concerns about that. So, and Werner and Philip can correct me if I'm wrong on the process, but the town was concerned about the way they were operating the property and suggested that they come for a change of use from the multiplex to an in use, which both of those uses are conditional uses in the zone, which is where we're at today. We filed the application to do that. It was kind of a good faith effort on the owners to do this. One of the things that we had to do in order to meet the definition of an inn is an inn can only have 9 units, and there was 11 units in the multiplex, the 9-unit building and the 2 single-family homes. So what they're going to do is they're keeping the 2 single-family homes as individual units there, and then they're going to take the larger building and combine 4 of the units to make 2. So that will go from a 9-unit to a 7-unit building. So on the property total, there'll be 9 short-term rental units. Both as a inn and the multiplex, there were several what I would call conformity issues, and they deal primarily with setbacks and lot coverage. The multiplex had some setback issues, which, it's an existing structure. Same thing when we converted to an inn, the setbacks are different than a, say, residential structure. So anyway, there's some conformity issues that I noted in my letter of what those are. I can discuss them with you, or if you've read them and understand them, we can leave it at that. Parking is not an issue. There is adequate parking. There's really no changes. There is no changes to the site itself. It's really just the use and how it's being operated. I think with that, unless Philip or Justin want to add any comments to it, be happy to answer any questions the board has.
Okay. So basically, okay, I mean, I understand and read it, so I guess I'll just defer to the board. Does anybody, I guess, Ed, you were the stucky on this the last time.
Yeah, I recall it. And thank you, Steve, for including the findings of fact. I didn't have to go find it on my computer. I was a little confused by the write-up. Let me say that what I recall and what I read in the findings of fact is that the board approved 2 single-family homes and a multiplex. And the multiplex was non-conforming only in that it was 9 units rather than the allowed 8. And we agreed that the lot coverage and the setbacks were grandfathered, as the site has been historically 2 single-family homes and a 9-unit multiplex. And so that's what was grandfathered. Now I'm reading this application that you want to change its use from a 9-unit, from an 11-unit multiplex to a 9-unit inn. And I don't think that's what you have. I think you have 2 single-family homes and a 9-unit multiplex. So
No, I think I agree with that. Now that,
I'd like to
now
sort
that you,
that. Yeah. So I think the application it's a little confusing because of that to me.
no, I would agree with you now that you noted that.
Right. I had several questions. Let me see if I can just go through my notes. In fact, you just said again, my first question was that the cover letter says the applicant's been operating the residential condo units, which I assume all of them are set up as condos. That's the ownership as condos.
That is
The-
correct. I would defer to Justin or on that, but I believe that's the way it currently is, a condo.
Okay. And so the two single family homes and the units in the multiplex have been over the last year short-term rental, used as short-term rentals. And it says, which is an allowed residential use in the Cape Porpoise zone. And I was wondering where that allowance, where that comes from. Because I know in the land use ordinance, sort of our Bible, as you said, the inn is a conditional use, an allowed but conditional use, and the multiplex is an allowed but conditional use, and the residential single families are allowed uses. What is it that causes you to say that the short-term rental is an allowed use? Maybe this is a Werner question.
Yeah, I can weigh in, a little bit on that piece of it, Ed. So, so the town has, as you all know, the town has a separate licensing ordinance for short-term rentals for residential dwelling units.
That's the recent one.
That correct. Yes.
That wasn't in effect in February 2020 when this was before the board.
That's correct. So previously, we all know that short-term rentals have operated in town for many years. It was not something that was defined as a use, as when a property gets, when it gets rented short-term, it still is the same use. The only thing that is different is the time frame in which it is occupied. So hence they're occupied short-term versus long-term. So the town adopted a short-term rental, licensing ordinance, which currently, as it currently stands, the property owners have had opportunity to register for those licenses, provided that they've had evidence that they have operated as such. So, and I can provide a little, some more background in terms of how this application, is before you, and certainly Justin and Phil, feel free to chime in here. When the property ownership changed, so the property went through your all's review as a multiplex. It also went through a review process with myself as code enforcement officer and the town attorney for a condominium conversion, and as such was marketed, and I believe some of the units were sold as such. So the property ownership, as Steve gave you a little bit of history, changed, and so it was sold to the current owner. And what we then became aware of, and there is a letter that was drafted by the town attorney, Amy Chow, in where the town became concerned with how 15 Langsford was being marketed and operated, in the sense that it was being operated in a fashion more akin to a commercial inn use, as opposed to separate multiplex or separate residential units. And so the town recommended to the property owner that, and this, what we observed is certain, the combination of amenities and services and process that was not, that is not typical of a residential short-term rental. And again, so it was the town's opinion that this property was being operated more so as a inn versus a residential property. And so it was our recommendation to the owner that they come to the board and request a change of use to an inn, which, as you all know, this property is in the Cape Porpoise Square zone, and an inn is listed as a conditional use for that zone. So to that effect, what you're looking at is a change of use request for this property to that inn use. Now, what Steve has outlined a bit is the number of units and that they're proposing to bring the multiplex building into, and that's primary. And the reason for that is based on the definition of inn. So definition of inn, which is the use, gives you that 7 limitation in terms of your rooms. So it is in an attempt to meet that particular performance standard.
9, right. Nine dwelling units. Or
But these would then be treated as these then wind up being treated as an inn,
yeah,
as opposed to residential units.
Understood. And it's not a hotel because hotel's not a conditional use.
That's correct. Yes. In that zone.
Yeah. Okay. I know that there was some sensitivity after the fact in February 2020 about some of the abutters, some of whom may be on now. I don't know about the potential for traffic impact if it was in fact going to be an inn. At least that's what I read into the letters. And I know that we didn't, as a board, consider traffic because, as far as we knew, these were going to be marketed as individual condos that would be individually held, and we sort of treated them as residential properties, a multiplex and 2 single families. So I just think it's important as we go forward and we ask for comments from the public that we're clear that we're converting to single family homes and a multiplex, which was what was previously approved, to an inn, and not a multiplex to an inn. That was why I was harping on that. Werner, are you saying that the town is advocating for this?
No, I'm not taking a position as far as advocating for it. All I'm saying is that based on what we observed in terms of the operations, is that we believed that it was operating more akin to an inn versus a residential multiplex.
Understood.
And so in terms of having the property operate within the confines of the land use ordinance, it was our recommendation to the property owner that they come before the planning board.
Okay, that sounds good. A question for Steve: if this use of inn is approved, would that allow meals? Do you intend to take advantage of the definition of an inn, in that meals would then possibly be offered to the public?
I kind of defer to Justin, but I don't think so. I mean, these units have, full kitchens in them. So I guess I'd kind of defer to Justin, but I don't see that they would. I mean, people can prepare their own food in them. And I think that's the intent, that, they can bring their own food in and prepare their own food, just like, but it's not like food is being brought to them. Justin, correct me if I'm wrong, but
yeah, no, I would confirm that. Yeah, the folks that stay there cook in their own kitchens in the space. There's no kitchen application on the inside that would allow us to produce and sell food.
There's no intent for that in the future. In other words, yeah.
No.
How about a liquor license?
I think liquor could be something we'd be interested in exploring, but we don't have any, confirmed intentions of it at this time.
So tell me, what's the reasoning that you want to go from an STR to an N?
I could take this if you don't mind, Justin. So I'm Phil Saucier, and I'm the attorney working with the applicant. And as we said in the letter, we still think we could operate it as an STR under the current definitions. We've disagreed with the town, but the company has wanted to work with the town ever since they contacted us, me, and Justin, to say that they didn't think we could operate an STR. So we've been trying to work together. The town suggested that we operate as an inn, or that we apply as an inn, and the town's attorney wrote a letter to me as such last May. And so we've had a couple of meetings. I think that we would prefer to continue operating an STR, but the company is, and we had a meeting with the town last fall, has certainly wants to work with the town. There's an effort to work with what the town wants us to do. It will result in 2 less units than we currently have. So it is a change. It's a reduction in the number of units. It wasn't the preferred course, but the company certainly does want to work with the town. So that's why we've been doing this. That's why we applied. If that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Werner, possible to share with us Amy's letter?
Yes. Yep, absolutely. We can make that available to the board.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to see that. I have 2 problems with this conversion. You're trying to basically fit a hotel or motel into an inn description as far as I'm concerned. But more importantly than that, as far as nonconformance is concerned, the minute you try to change this to an inn, you get more nonconforming because you don't meet the dimensional structural limitations. You don't meet the 40-foot setbacks. And the other problem with it is, Langsford Road is a very small, narrow residential road in a residential neighborhood, and trying to turn something that was residential and is supposed to be residential into a commercial inn, I think is not something that's suited for the neighborhood. And I want to make sure that letters have gone to all abutters by now, absolutely, because I have a feeling that the neighborhood is not going to like this at all. We've had some discussions with the neighbors about other structures in there. They've been very concerned, and they don't like what's happening on Langsford Road. This is a change that's going to bring more traffic. I don't care what your traffic report says in there. I know Langsford Road. Second, this is not just a structural change. This is a change of use, and it's a change of use that brings more people in over time. It's going to be 1 to 2 day rentals, basically, and it's going to go from residential condos, which is what we were led to believe when we approved this, even though it was non-conforming. And you're definitely not grandfathered in for an inn. And it requires a very different and a very substantial change of use. I don't see it right now. I don't see how you could go there. I'd also like to see that letter from Amy about short-term rentals. When we approved this, we were led to believe that it was going to be condos, and they were going to be, bought out or used for long-term rentals. And people were concerned about that on Langsford Road. And now you tell us basically you're going to have an inn there with people coming and going. I don't buy it. I think it's a substantial change of use, and I don't think you meet the dimensions. I think you make it much more non-conforming when you go to the dimensional requirements of an inn versus residential.
Yeah, the dimensional standards, just to be clear, is that with an inn, you have to be 40 feet from a property line and
That's right.
a 20-foot buffer. With a multiplex, you have to be 50 feet, which we didn't comply with that one. So going to the inn. the
But if you look
multiplex-
on all sides, I think you're increasing. the
Yes, correct.
nonconformities.
Yeah, so the main building was non-conforming to begin with.
Right.
The single family, when they were approved as single families, they met the setback in the zone as that unit. And when we
Almost.
can,
Almost. I
they,
think that front left corner didn't make it, did it?
it did.
Okay,
Yeah, they ended up buying, they all met the setbacks
I see.
for
It was-
residential.
You're saying it only didn't meet the 50-foot for the multiplex.
Exactly, yeah. And then now that we go for an inn, none of the buildings meet that 40-foot.
And,
Or
and,
the-
and that buffer, the 20-foot buffer specifically excludes driveways. So I think that's not met. That's a new nonconformity.
Yeah, and there's a few other items, some sidewalks, there's a pool deck, a few things that
Lot
get into
coverage
that.
too.
And the lot coverage, yes.
Got
Yes.
worse- Got worse. The requirement got worse. The lot coverage didn't change. But
Didn't change. Yeah, nothing changed on the site, but the standards is where the issues come in.
I think the big concern is, as you're hearing from a number of us, is the impact on the street of the use change. Your point in your application was, well, the coverage is what the coverage is. We're not making it any worse because we're not changing any structures. It's really, the focus here is on use. And my first reaction was, boy, we didn't even think about traffic before. It had the same number of residences. That's the first thing that jumps out at me here, is that you've got an extremely busy small street already, and you must have some data or some experience from this summer. If in fact you've been operating it as short-term rentals, there must be a way to have seen the impact in traffic. Has it really been benign?
I guess I would defer to Justin. I haven't, I don't travel that road enough
Yeah.
to know. I
Understood.
would look to
It's a-
Justin.
It's a small residential road. It has a fish market on it at the initial part of the road. It has, I believe, a store there.
Well, Steve,
Yeah,
you,
there's
one
you know,
story.
you know the road. I mean,
I know the road.
just
There's a
you're not
lot
there
of,
all the time.
yeah, there's a lot of homes being renovated. There's a lot
Oh,
of,
Yeah, that's
there's
right.
a lot of, landscapers going down there. There's a lot of traffic on that
A
road. And
busy
then there's a
street.
lot of people parking on that road, going
That's
to the
true for
church.
Entire town. I think that
Exactly.
but the math bears it out, Steve. If you have residents, they go to their residence, they might go to work, they might go out for dinner, but they've got an expected use of traffic. If I have a transience of an inn, I have people coming in and I have people going out. So if someone checks in on Saturday morning, it means someone is checking out Saturday morning. So just the math means I've got twice as many people accessing that road on that particular day. I don't know how you calculate that out, but it's a different kind of use. Residence
and
versus hotel is different, or inn.
Yeah.
Well,
And we
it's-
did provide a traffic memo, which it bases it on the types of use, whereas an inn or a multifamily, they're similar. I think there's actually a slight reduction. I mean, you may not believe this, but the report's saying there's a slight reduction because we're losing 2 units under this scenario from the multifamily.
But you're not losing them from a residential use, which was approved. You're losing them from a rapid short-term rental use, which was not approved.
Right. And
That's the game, that we're nervous about. I'm nervous about the verbiage, about the way we speak to this, what words we use, because I know we did not approve an 11-unit short-term rental development on Langsford Road. We didn't treat it that way. So that's not the current state. And if you're saying that's the way we operated this past year, I'm of the opinion that wasn't what was approved by the planning board.
on top of that, you have lot coverage. You have almost half of your lot covered. And when you go from residential which could be much quieter. Too busy, check in, check out. Okay, it's going to miss driveways. I know that, I live next to a B&B and people mistake my driveway all the time. I have to put up signs. I've had to put up gates, no, this is not the B&B, go one more driveway down. And when you have an inn and you have people going in and out all the time that have not been in the neighborhood trying to find your inn, you're going to have people who make mistakes. You're going to have people who turn around in residents' driveways. It's just a lot more impact when you go into something commercial like that.
Okay.
I have a quick comment if it's the right time. Didn't want to interrupt. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. These are all good comments. I mean, this is some of the issues we've been discussing with the town over the last, I'd say, 6 months or so. Because on the intensity issue, again, the issue is that residential use as currently defined in your ordinance and the short-term rental ordinance, you're allowed to use a residential unit as a short-term rental, right? So now there's a new licensing ordinance that requires a license for those. And so the company, for example, has applied for those and other properties that the town has asked them to apply for and other people have. So this can already be, and it's again, something we struggle with. This can already be used in our view as short-term rentals and was until the town, we worked with the town asked us to stop advertising as such. And the company did late last fall. But if these are individual condo owners, for example, each individual condo owner could short-term rental these under your current ordinance. So that is not something new that's allowed. Your ordinance specifically says commercial use does not include the rental of residential units. So that's where we're coming from, and that's how residential units are rented right now as a short-term rental concept. So from the company's perspective, nothing is going to change. In fact, it's going to be, the intensity is going to go down because there's going to be fewer units that can be rented in that manner. It was an attempt to work with the town. The town asked us to apply for the inn. There's nothing that would change per se in the way the company operates the property, other than now there'll be 2 less units, if that helps. It is a difficult concept in terms of the short-term rental idea, but that is the way it works today under the current ordinance. Is you can rent your residential unit in this district with a license now as a short-term rental, and there's nothing that would exclude that currently. And I'll let obviously Amy and Werner's sort of speak for themselves, but over the last, what the town has been telling the company is that they were concerned with the way it was operated in conjunction with the rest of the company's properties. And in Amy's letter, she specifically says that it was not separated in their mind from the other properties in town. And so it operated on a way, in a manner that was sort of more like an inn instead of a short-term rental. So it wasn't that short-term rentals would not be allowed here. It was the manner in which the company was operating it. So the company's made a number of changes to their properties throughout town, not just this property, and as a result of those conversations. And so that's where we are in front of you as the inn. That's how we've got here.
Phil, is that doesn't seem consistent with your application that says in item 12 that you have the existing commercial floor space is a multifamily residential. It sort of claims this is, or admits that this is a commercial property.
I'm sorry, where is that, item 12?
Item 12 in your application letter, application for site review, Kennebunkport Planning Board, items 1 through 15. Item 12 says commercial floor space in square feet. Doesn't give the square footage, but it says that the existing is commercial floor space.
Yeah, what I did, I did that. I mean, it's where it says what's existing.
Yeah.
This is currently multifamily residential.
Yeah.
I see. You're saying it's not commercial floor space.
Right.
It's not, no, it's just saying it's multifamily. That's what's existing there today.
Yeah.
So you think that this then, even though it's all the same owner and it's operated as and marketed as a unit, it still comes under the individual short-term rental policy. So,
We
so
do.
if you could buy all the houses on the street, you could do it that way. There's nothing.
Well, I
in
mean,
our
I think that's where
rental that precludes that, and so that's your position legally.
Well, not quite. I mean, I think the town has. We didn't completely disagree with the town. I mean, what the town was. So I think under your scenario, I agree. If you were to buy every house on the street and operate it as a inn, if you will, the look and feel of an inn, that kind of thing. You've got a website that shows it, all that kind of thing. Then, and it was part of a larger property, and you had food service, and that would be something different. If you owned individual condo units, whether it's one person who owned all the individual condo units or each individual condo unit owner, certainly can, at least as your ordinance is currently defined, could short-term rental that property. You're allowed to do that. It's residential use is explicitly defined that way, even under the new ordinance, as long as you get a license, right? So you have to get a license for that. So, they may have to make, there could be some operational changes that would have to happen. For example, limitations on how it's operated. They're not going to have food service, for example, not going to do any of these kinds of things that you would think of as an inn. And maybe there are other conditions that could be put on it, if you're inclined to move forward with this. But I do think there are some differences between short-term rentals and inns.
Yeah, and I think what's important to understand is that when the town was having these conversations, what we were seeing is that the Langsford is which is how the property was being referred to, was being marketed and advertised as one of the 10 luxury lodging accommodations that was advertised as part of the Kennebunkport Resort Collection. And so, at that point, when you have, marketing and amenities that identify the property in with a group of other properties as inns and hotels, I think it's difficult then to turn around and say, well, it's not really operating as an inn and a hotel. So that is certainly part of the reasoning, behind the town making the request to the property owner to come forward to the planning board that if they wished to operate the property in that fashion, that it was appropriate for them to come to the planning board to request the change of use.
If we were to come to agreement that this change of use was allowed, that it could be a 9-unit inn, then it could be marketed as one of the collection of properties, and that it was, like you say, the Langsford Inn then, and marketed in that fashion. That would allow that to happen without concern from the town.
Correct.
I see. Okay. I don't have any more questions.
Okay. So let's see. Larry, do you have any questions?
Well, I did have something on page 3. You talk about on-site parking, and you just talk about you have 22 spaces and 23 spaces, but then you insert some other words, which is really, in my view, needs a whole new section. But you say there's not going to be any employees on site. They're going to have the site manager operating out of the Cabot Cove cottages. And then you're going to have cleaning services and maintenance that'll visit the site every now and then. And you have one parking space for the cleaning services and maintenance. But I think Cabot Cove Cottages is only open for 6 months a year. So how is the site manager? I mean, so could you clarify that? You got some special deal with Cabot Cove to be open for a year for your manager's office?
Yeah, I can take that one, Steve. So our manager happens to manage both the Langsford and Cabot Cove cottages. Her name's Karen. She, operates out of Cabot Cove cottages in the 6 months that Cabot Cove is allowed to operate, May through October. And then otherwise she's remote, either from her office here in Kennebunk or even from her house or anywhere else. Because there's no on-site office space on the property.
Okay. Okay. So, all right, well, that clears that up. So, yeah, that's my only question. I will say I was a little surprised though to see the application to be operated as an inn when I thought we were going to have some individual residential ownership. So it's going to be interesting to see how this progresses. That's it. Thank you.
Tom, I just had one more thing. If you're looking at cleaning up that application, you have a section in it on multiplex in the cover letter, I think it is.
Yes.
And it says item 1 that the count of 11 is grandfathered for the multiplex. And
Yeah, that should be 9.
the total number of buildings that are there in their existing configuration is grandfathered. I agree with that, but
Yep.
multiplex was only 9.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, Dina, do you have anything else?
Not at this time. I want to hear from neighbors, how they feel about this in their neighborhood, but I do have a sensitivity issue there, whereas the written words and the language of the applicant seem to imply that the Board of Selectmen, the town, is in favor of an inn, whereas they've only suggested that you might try to make it as an inn. You might try to get approval for an inn. And as Warner has said, the town has only suggested that you could come before the planning board to get approval for an inn. They're not in favor of it one way or another, as far as I understand.
Okay, how about you, George, or anything?
I've never been back out around behind the back of the property, just through the front. And I know a lot of the space outside the building is taken up by parking spaces. And I'm guessing that there's a homeowners association of some sort, condominium owners association that coordinates things now, but it's an inn. Can someone come in and have an event there? Could they set up a tent, have a wedding, band?
That's a good question. I don't think there's a place to set up anything, but I don't know.
I've seen a lot of crazy things done.
Exactly.
I've seen VW Beetles hauling big trailers on the turnpike.
Yeah.
22 parking lots, you can put up a big tent.
Yeah. Probably bring in some carnies and have a tilt-a-whirl. I'm just curious.
Justin, do you
With a
have anything
homeowners
to say on
association, that's
that?
less likely to happen. But I mean, with an inn, can I have an event? And if not you, the next owner, next lucky owner.
It's a good question.
I don't know that there is a homeowners. I don't think that.
No, it's
that's
one
a
owner.
given. Yeah.
Okay.
I found it interesting that the address of the owner, that the new owner, was the same or very similar to the address of the applicant back in last February. Is it really just a paper change? Guys,
No,
it's 2 Livewell Drive, right?
yes. Yeah, so Tim Harrington, his address is 2 Livewell Drive.
Right.
And Kennebunkport Resort Collection, or the 15 Langford Road owner LLC, is also out of that same building.
Yeah.
But it is a different owner.
Unrelated.
That is a large building. I don't know if you're familiar with that building, but it's a multi-unit building.
Back to this event idea. I don't know why I'm stuck on it. But I mean, there's potentials in inn. I could book out the entire inn. I block out all the rooms, bring my wedding party in, or whatever it is. There's the usual noise ordinances and all that sort of thing prevail in the town, but I would like to explore that. I don't know where all they would park, but got shuttle buses could always park the central location and come around.
You never know what's going to happen. At the B&B a couple of years ago, the police had to be called on a wedding
Oh my
party
God.
because one guest was strangling another.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, about 2 a.m.
Yeah, and it's that sort of thing. I live, at the end of the driveways to VCI and all the other places around. So I hear everything at night. But I live in a tourist town. I understand that, and I think that Cape Porpoise, I don't think of as a tourist town. It's kind of a quieter spot, and there's no place in Cape Porpoise that where that many people could congregate at one spot. I don't think.
George, I'm having a hard time thinking about what the change that's being proposed here, the request that's on the table, how that would make it more likely for that party to occur.
It's an inn.
But all of these are short-term rentals now being marketed under the same on the same website.
Okay.
So why couldn't someone come in and rent them all for the same date?
They could.
I have trouble with that concept.
They could, but they might not be able to get a permit to set up a tent.
Yeah, remember, this is a conditional use too. I'm not putting any words in Justin's, but as a conditional use, the board has that ability to,
Conditions.
to review. Yeah, exactly.
I think events could certainly be limited. I mean, as you all alluded to, there's some operational challenges to trying to pull off an event there. But the same way I could, at my house in Kennebunkport, I could have a tent and a wedding at some point as well, just as many people do. I think the Atlantic Hall is the most common event site in Cape Porpoise, which is right down the street. But again, if events were a concern for the board or for the neighborhood, obviously that can be discussed and restricted.
Atlantic Hall is a good comparison.
Looking to operate primarily as an event center, but as you also mentioned, if you had enough friends and family, you could rent the 2 cottages and the multiplex today.
I think the concern, my concern is have we inadvertently in last February paved the way for a new Atlantic Hall, another event center in the middle of Langsford Road, a commercial property essentially that the wording of the town ordinance somehow allows because as short-term rentals, when in fact we either were led ourselves to believe we were approving a change that would be for residential property and not
an interesting observation. The next owner taking condominiums and converting them into a different use is one thing, but with an inn, I don't know the structure of the building, but could I consolidate some rooms and create an event center, a mini event center? It's not a big event in Cape Porpoise, but I'm just curious about how all these things play out over time. We've all seen properties change over time.
Yeah.
Well, if we allow the inn, then consolidating and making it effectively smaller, why? I'm not sure that would even come to it. Well, it would come to us as a conditional use, but why would we be concerned with that?
I don't know.
We're already, if we in fact allow an 11 property 11 suite inn.
Well, we didn't allow for short-term rentals at that particular time. We were allowing for condos, and we're led to believe it was residential. So the planning board was, working with the neighborhood to basically approve residential units. The short-term rental regulations basically came in afterwards, and we had nothing to do with them. So they can change things in a neighborhood very quickly. They can change the character of a property. What we're being asked to do is look at a serious change of use to an inn, and that opens up all sorts of other possibilities.
I have a question. Just explain to the board, if you would, and it had to be somewhat dramatic, that the town actually got involved with an STR. What were you doing that made the town get involved with an STR to suggest that you might, try to change it to an inn? Why was the town involved?
Because you were treating it like an inn. You were treating it like a motel or a hotel or an inn. And the way you're advertising it as a property that could be rented out on a regular basis, like an inn or a motel, and putting it into a category of other properties when you advertised it that made it look like a motel or hotel or an inn.
I see a hand raised. I don't know if that's Amy, or if that's just somebody from the public. If Amy McNally.
No, I think it's just as a point of procedure. It's important for folks to know that this is an initial review of this application, and so because it's an initial review, at this particular meeting, no public comment is taken. That will be done when the board schedules the public hearing. Then at that point in time, public input will be allowed.
Okay.
I would like to know that all abutters at this point have been notified. There has been something sent out to all abutters with this application that has been done even a week before this particular initial review. Do you know that?
So Nina, our process is such that when applications come in, a letter goes out that tells folks that an application has been received. And then when the planning board sets the public hearing, then that's when a certified notice goes out to all properties that are within 200 feet.
Okay.
So, I just want to clarify, my comments were not directed at Nina to respond, but more so to Justin or Phil or Steve. What had occurred where the town was so dramatic that the town had to get involved and call you folks or communicate with you?
Yeah, thanks. I think I was the first one that was contacted, or maybe it was Justin, but Amy reached out to me pretty early on, and at least, obviously it wasn't a concern about any kind of guests or traffic. It was, I think, as Werner said, and I agreed with the way it was described to me, it was that they saw it being advertised in a way that seemed in the town's view to be more like an inn. In other words, so it was more that they saw the way it was being advertised, the way it was, the sort of the look and the feel of it as it relates to the other Kennebunkport properties of the company. And so they reached out with that concern. So in the town's view, that it was being marketed in a way that was not like an STR. In other words, so it was more about the use issue than it was the specific uses that were happening there. I mean, again, I'll let Werner speak. I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but that's what was communicated to me. And we had many phone calls and conversations over the last 6 months about it, about sort of this issue. So it was really about the designation of the use and the property itself being part of a larger, being owned by a company that owned other properties in town, and how that was marketed. It was a marketing issue, partly. For example, at one point that they asked the company to take the marketing down, to disassociate that property from their website that had the other properties on it. And so the company did do that. For example, they took it off of their main website, a link to it. So that's the way it was communicated to me, at least. And so we got into a discussion about short-term rentals and whether it was an inn or not and that kind of thing. And that's how we got here today. So that's what I know. Werner might have more to add to that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what Phil's saying. I think, that, Kennebunkport Resort Collection has, a professional staff that works very diligently at their marketing. And so, if you're paying attention to things that are occurring in town, it's difficult to not to get notifications of when, properties are being marketed. And so, as we mentioned before, when, the Langsford is being marketed as is one of 10 luxury lodging accommodations that are part of the resort collection, which identified itself as, as owning the best inns, resorts, and hotels in Kennebunkport, it's difficult to look at that and say, wow, we have a property that's being marketed and advertised as an inn here. And that's not how our documentation identifies it, and that is not the use that we recognize it as. And so in our discussions, we identified to Phil, the property owner, Justin, Steve, that, here's, if the property is to be operated in that fashion, then the path that they should consider is this path of coming to the planning board and asking for conditional use to operate as an inn.
Werner, was it a town official that noticed this? Do you regularly look at that, or was it a resident who brought it to your attention?
Oh gosh, that's a good question, Nina. I I can tell you, I don't regularly peruse all the business websites, but it was a combination of items. I mean, we were notified by property, by residents, as well as, once things get pointed out to us, we do our own due diligence as well.
Right.
I believe that, we have some staff that get, that get email notifications about different, different commercial, activities. But those are email notifications that are put out by those companies, that if you sign up for, notifications, that those are available. But no, we were notified, as my recollection is, we were notified by a number of parties.
Scott, if you look online, the website is the Langsford KPT.
Thank you.
And you can check it out.
Yeah, and I'd agree with what Werner said. The one thing I'd follow up with is the company obviously was not trying to hide what they were doing. They thought they were, and still think they were, operating short-term rentals. So it wasn't that they were trying to, operate an inn. They still didn't think they're operating an inn. What we're asking for now is to be able to do that based on the conversations we had with the town. And we've been operating and having these conversations in good faith over the last 6 months with the town about it, and certainly have been above board, I think, from our perspective, and had very fruitful conversations. So it was not we're going to operate it as an inn and advertise it as an inn. From their perspective, is they really believe they were operating as short-term rentals, fit within the ordinance. The town has their perspective. We've agreed to apply. It's kind of where we are.
I guess I would add, Phil and Justin, I mean, the way it's operating today as the short-term rentals, if this became an inn, I mean, you really don't see anything changing the way it's operated today. I'm asking, I don't.
Yeah, correct.
No.
The only difference for us on our end is we're losing, 2 of those units, in the multiplex building. So we're shrinking, the number of units we have for rent. That's the most sizable change for us operationally.
I mean, it's not like they have a lobby there that, people come into. It's really, you get your room remotely, it's not like there's a big staff coming in there to clean everything and, operating like an inn is. It's totally different.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, I think everybody on the board except maybe John, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, thank you. All right. So clearly we're going to have a lot of fun in future weeks on this one. So I guess where we are now is we need to define this as complete so that we can go on to a public hearing and such. I'm also very anxious to see all of that stuff with the Amy, the information from Amy.
Yep. So I have on my list to provide that, as well as we'll be posting that on the town website then as well, since that's a document that the board has requested.
Good.
Good. Okay, I guess I'll accept a motion to to declare this application complete so we can get on with the process?
I would move that the application be declared complete with the changing of the existing use of the property from multifamily 11 to single family and multiplex.
What?
Item 4 on the application right now says that the existing use is multifamily 11 units. And it's not.
Correct.
It's 2 single family residences and a multiplex. That's the use that we approved back in February.
So you're asking for a change to the application?
That page, yes.
Yeah.
I thought that wasn't substantial enough if it's agreed to hold another 2 weeks.
No.
I would propose that we declare it to be complete with the agreement that typo would be fixed.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, well, let me go through the board then here. So I'm in favor, Nina,
In favor?
Scott,
In favor?
Ed,
In favor?
Larry.
In favor.
Okay, so we will see you on the 19th.
Thank you very much.
Public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, so David, can we get forward Mr. McKinnon?
Sorry, did we have a case manager for?
Oh, do we have a case manager? For
I'm happy to pick that up, Tom, as I had it before.
that you would have been my first choice too. So okay, good.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so we need to get Mr. McKinnon in, and maybe we could get an inventory from David of how many participants we currently have.
That would be
McKellar.
McKellar.
McKellar, I'm sorry.
Michael, yeah, Mike McKellar.
Sorry.
Okay, I think you got us. You guys have us now?
We do.
Great. Good evening. Should I just proceed as or?
Yeah, so let's hear about your minor subdivision change.
Great. Thank you. So I'm Mike McKellar. It's my wife, Heather McKellar. We reside currently at 100 Oak Ridge Road in Kennebunkport. We've been here for the past 6 years. We have roughly 20 acres of property here that we are looking to remove a portion of that property and adjoin it with an acre which we purchased from an abutter just recently in order to maintain, in order to create 2 separate lots and maintain the required 3 acres of upland in the farm and forest zone over here on Oak Ridge Road. So we would like to take a portion of our lot and break that off to create 2 separate lots. Our intention for the subdivision is solely an investment, meaning that we would we're kind of undetermined depending on the cost of building these days, but originally it was to create a second lot, build a home that we would sell as an investment, but we may move just to subdivide and just sell the land as is, but it would be for investment purposes.
Okay, so to get the, we're gonna have to help me here a little bit, but this is a minor subdivision. The actual change to a subdivision is you're deleting some land from your lot. So that's why that's the minor subdivision change.
That's
correct. The land
correct.
that you deleted is now appended to an acre that was not in the original subdivision.
Correct.
Okay, so you're just subtracting out
That's right.
a piece as far as our minor subdivision change.
That's correct.
Okay.
So to the board, this is a I would say a bit of an odd and a unique application here, in the sense that the McKellar's lot is identified on the original subdivision plan that you all have as, it was in some fashions, it was referred to as remaining land, but it was also identified as lot 4. It's also identified in their deed as lot 4. And so, and this is I think it's not an uncommon conundrum for planning boards on what do you do with this remaining land that sometimes is out there from subdivisions. And so I suspect the planning board, back when when the Fitzpatrick subdivision was done, likely struggled with that same question. And so, given the fact that it was referred to as lot 4 on the Fitzpatrick subdivision, and the fact that the deed referred to it as lot 4, when Mike and I spoke about this, I said, well, this is a modification to a subdivision. However, with it, with the intent being not to create an additional lot within the subdivision, that's not what's happening here, but instead we're removing some land from the subdivision and adding it to some land that is outside of the bounds of the subdivision. We're not actually creating another subdivision lot. I know I said subdivision probably way too many times there, but so it's not, this is not lot 5 in the Fitzpatrick subdivision. So hence my recommendation to the McKellars to proceed with a request for a minor amendment as opposed to a major.
Okay, but the minor amendment is still to the Fitzpatrick subdivision.
Right.
Correct.
So the subdivision name needs to be lot 4 of Fitzpatrick or some such thing rather than 100 Oak Ridge Road.
Yeah, I have 2 questions there, Warner. The first is, why isn't this a major revision? Because basically you're taking land from a subdivision, even though you're not creating more lots, you're taking it, you're changing the borders of the subdivision. And second is, do we have authority to do that as planning board, to remove land from a subdivision? I've been going through the subdivision regs and I don't understand where we have the authority. Maybe you found something. Or
so the property owner has the right to appear before the board to ask for a property line, to adjust the property lines within the subdivision. And that's what you have here before you. The reason why it's not a major revision is because you're not adding, this is not lot 5 in the subdivision. This is removing a portion of land from lot 4.
yeah, but that's where I have a problem, in that if you were creating a lot, we have authority, there's no question. If you were moving lines around within the subdivision, I don't have a problem with it. But you're taking away from the subdivision an amount of land, the total subdivision. You're not changing within the subdivision. You're changing to take it without the subdivision. And that's where I'm not sure, I don't understand where the planning board even has authority to do that once a subdivision is formed. Maybe we do, maybe we just take it as apparent authority. I would also consider it a major change.
Well, there has to be a process, right? And so, I would tell you that it doesn't fall under my authority
Right.
to authorize the modification. So if it's not under my authority, then it has to be under someone's. And so, I would revert that decision back to the body that granted the approval in the first place, which would be the planning board. From whatever year the original plan was was first approved. And I think it's important too to think of what your, what's your differentiation between minor versus major. Your primary difference in this particular case is whether or not you walk somebody through a preliminary review and then you turn around and walk it through a final review, which in this case, from a practical perspective, you would just be repeating the same information twice. And instead, and from a timing perspective, we're going from 3 meetings to 6 meetings and adding another 30 days in between. And so with that being the case, and again, this is my opinion in terms of looking at the subregs, is that this was more appropriately treated as a minor amendment versus a major.
Okay.
Can I ask a related question, Nina? I had the same struggle and I have the same result right now as to, is this even something that is done? You have a subdivision as a result of a subdivision process. You took a plot of land and you broke it into 4 pieces. You put deed restrictions on all 4 of those pieces as to what could be done with it. I mention that only because your deed, Mr. McKellar, says you can only build 1 residence on that land that you own, the 20 acres. Now what you're proposing is to divide it in half, and now are you going to be able to build 2 residences on that property? Well, I guess so. But I don't see how we have the authority to circumvent a deed restriction. We didn't levy that.
Yeah, the end result of it is that you still only wind up with 1 residential unit on lot 4.
I understand. It's a good trick.
Mhm.
But it seems like it seems artificial to me. It seems like, the whole restrictions about doing subdivisions. I can only do so many in a 5-year period, et cetera. This seems like it might be a way around that. We could.
I think I would feel more comfortable if you could ask Amy, and she doesn't have to write a formal letter, but does the planning board have the authority to take land out of a subdivision?
Right.
I would agree,
Okay.
Nina. That would make me. This is when you'd like to have a lawyer.
The town attorney give an
on the
opinion
board. Yeah.
so that the board feels more comfortable with it.
And in part of that would be and how to deal with the current deed restrictions on that land. That deed is going to have to. The deeds are going to have to change as a result of this process.
So I think you have, there's 2 questions that I'm hearing here. One is more of a process question, right?
Right.
And an authority question. And then, the second is more procedural based on the specifics of the application. So there's 1, do we have the authority to do this?
Right.
And then 2, you have what sounds like some specific questions about, the peculiarities, I would say, of the, of the deed.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The only reason why I ask is that that may direct me in 2 different directions to get answers to your questions. That's all.
Yeah.
So.
I don't have any problem with breaking it into 2 parts, but in my simple mind, it seemed like one conundrum that you said, wait a minute, I have an existing lot. It's described in a deed that has certain restrictions. What I'm proposing to do here is to take a part of that land, move it out from under that deed, do the restrictions flow with it, with that section of property, for example. I thought they did as I read it, but maybe they don't. And just the process question is foremost in my mind.
It's possible that the section that they're taking out is not going to be built on, and so the covenant running with the land would be all right. But if it becomes part of another lot, does the covenant run? through the lot.
I don't know. And I assume that adding this additional 1 acre or so is important because of meeting the upland requirement on the
That's correct.
resultant 5 acre. Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, because the majority of our property is, forested wetland.
Yeah.
For the most part, we have currently 5.67 acres of upland out of the just under 20 acres that we own. So yes, in order to meet the standard of
Two
the.
lots.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I don't have any problem with what they want to do, but I just would like some authority telling me we could do it.
I couldn't agree more. And in part, just to confirm that, you guys, I don't see any reason why you would, but do you have a homeowners association among the 4 lots? Is there any, they're 4 separate lots. It just happened to have been created at a single time, and therefore they have the name subdivision.
Right. There's no shared infrastructure as part of this subdivision, so all of these, the lots that you have here, they all have frontage out on Oak Ridge Road. And so, I suspect at the time it was really, it's a matter of process. I have X amount of acreage and I'd like to have 4 lots. And so, statute says that's a subdivision. And so I need to go through a process.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
there is in the.
I mean, the reverse.
There's a, because it was a subdivision, Warner, there was talk about about common land, right? And there is in the deed a reference to common land that's on the other side of the street. What's going on there?
Well, so to understand that, you have another Fitzpatrick subdivision on the other side of the street. I don't know if this board reviewed any of that or not. I think actually technically you had 3 Fitzpatrick subdivisions, in the grand history. You had, and so that's likely what that was referring to. You'd have to kind of look at, to really understand that, Ed, you'd have to kind of look at the whole the history of ownership. If you,
I tried.
if you're looking at that puzzle.
I did. And, I got a little bit of vision into it, but it's got that legalese framework and all. It's, as you know, it's not easy. But I know that in the end, I came away understanding that the restrictions and stipulations that are in the McKellar deed, I thought made reference to the use of common land that is shared among the 4 lots, and it's on the other side of the street.
Yeah. Let me.
If that's the case, that's certainly news to us.
Yeah.
It's it's not a practical use, right? It may be just a legacy.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. What I can do if you would like, I can pull up the the GIS maps just to kind of show you the overall idea, or I would say the overall history, if that would be helpful.
Sure.
All right. Okay, so what you're looking at here, so just as a point of reference, this is Oak Ridge Road, what you have right here. And so, and this is the McKellar's property right here. And so you have these other lots, so here's, I believe, you start with, this was probably lot 1, 2, 3, and then McKellar's is this remaining land, lot 4. Okay. Then what you had is you had other land across the street. And so you had these lots were going to go from, say, 25 through, I want to say it's actually probably likely up to A. Or no, it was these first ones here, excuse me. So I think 25 through 29. And then this, what I'll call essentially this flag lot here was another Fitzpatrick subdivision that was done. And then from there you had remaining land, so this is also known as, this is Lucia Way. And this was the most recent subdivision that was done as Lucia Way. And I believe that open space associated with probably the first one, I think the McKellar piece, this was probably the first subdivision. Then you had the second subdivision over here. Then Lucia was the third one, that all have I would say, an ownership history together, in that Fitzpatrick owned all of this land at one point, and just over the years went through, the subdivision process at different times over the course of history. But I think it's likely this flag piece here that may have been referenced as, as open space.
Note 5 on the plan, the one where lot 4 is penciled in at the very top. You sent it out, Michael, in a letter to us, a separate letter.
Right.
Yep.
Note 5 on that says, owners of proposed lots shall have rights to use open space on subdivision of parcel 39-1 something by John Fitzpatrick. 39-1.
That's 39-1-3.
My lighting is bad here, as on my eyes, but that's the reference I'm making. And again, it was only important to me because I'm wondering about those rights going with the land that would be excised from the subdivision. Do those rights go away, or do those, how do you deal with that?
If it's in the deed, they don't go away, they run with the land, covenants run with the land.
But now it would be only part of the land, so,
Yeah.
but not the part you would build a home on.
No,
I wanted a lawyer that was smarter than me to look at it. I thought that was a great idea. Too hard. You sure this wasn't just, its name was lot 4, but it was really only a three lot subdivision originally? And this was excess land?
I would tell you that this would be a lot easier if the plan said remaining land and left it at that.
Yeah.
And if the deed also didn't make reference to it as lot 4, nor the plan,
Okay.
This is not something that would have come before the board.
Yeah.
that's right. That's right. So
I think we're just looking for a way to do this legally.
Well, so the reverse of this is that, if you don't review it as a minor, if you review it as a major, then you wind up doing the reverse. And that is, you bring additional land into the subdivision and, create lot 5, which, gives you the same result, but takes twice as long.
yeah,
From a
I'm
process
happy to,
perspective.
I'm happy to support the most expeditious legal way
right.
that we
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
I'll be glad to call it a minor if you just say that Amy gives us the authority to do this. Because I'm
Does
not
that help
sure.
frame the question?
Well, so my first step with this would actually just be to reach out to MMA Legal and present the scenario,
Okay.
of what we have here, and that we have this subdivision. Property owner is proposing to remove a portion and adjoin it with another piece, and planning board is wanting to understand procedurally who has the authority to review and grant that.
And what the mechanics are, should we have the authority?
Right. Yep.
Right. And remember to remind them that Kennebunkport doesn't do it like other towns, and that a zoning board of appeals, is an appeal from your decisions, not from the planning board decisions.
Okay.
Right. Well, and as you all know, you've been through the MMA class for planning boards. Is that state statute, in a case like this is going to be very vague. It's going to say that planning board reviews subdivisions. and here's what defines a subdivision.
Yes, I've been through the state statutes. It doesn't help at all.
Right. So it's got, the state statute is going to be very vague in saying that planning board, you review these things. But I'm happy to put that question to MMA legal.
That's a no cost approach. And if that does it, then that's great.
Yeah.
My experience with them is they're going to not be as clear as you might want them to be.
Yeah.
They can tell you some pros and cons and advice, but if that gets us there, that's great. And if not, I think it's the board, Werner, that is asking for Amy's help here, that we don't know how to do our job here. I don't think it's necessarily something that the applicant should be paying for.
Well, again, the first process will be with MMA legal, to ask that question, and then I can bring that response back to back to the board, and we can go from there.
Thank you.
Why don't you bring it back to the board in an email? If it's clear, just let us know.
Rather than
Sure.
waiting 2 weeks, you're saying? Yeah.
Well, my concern would be is that you all have a discussion in a public meeting, and that you
Yeah.
render a decision regarding your process and authority in a public meeting. So I'm happy to pass the information along, but my preference is that we have this discussion about that, at a public meeting.
Okay,
But that could be the next meeting. There's no
That's
reason-
correct.
it could be.
That's right.
Yeah.
That
As long as if we had the information ahead of time, it might expedite things when
Right.
we got there.
Yeah, that's what the goal would be, is that I'll shoot to have that information to you before the next meeting.
Okay.
So as far as what that means to the McKellers at this point, do we? declare-
This would be a
Meeting.
continued. It would be a continued initial review.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Okay,
So I would move to continue this initial review.
And I'll second that.
Agreed.
okay. Let's go through the usual list. I'm in favor of that. Nina,
In favor?
Scott,
In favor?
Ed,
In favor?
Larry.
In favor?
Okay, so what that means for you is we'll see you next time. Sorry.
That's no problem.
So then the time after that would end up being a public hearing, assuming everything was perfect. So,
Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
okay, thank you, folks. Well, as I said before,
For case
Item four.
manager.
case manager, yeah, good idea.
Oh, I'll do that if you want me to.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, as I said before, item 4, the Bali Mills Road development, we're going to talk about it next time. And now we come to George's item, number 5.
George, you want to speak to this?
Well, I, as an adjunct member of the faculty, I have to leave it up to a member of the quorum.
I see.
But it does mention the agenda. It's an agenda item. that we-
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Okay. Well, I'm in favor. Nina? Scott's in favor, right?
In favor?
Everyone's in favor.
And
I'm in
everybody.
favor.
Unanimous.
Yes,
It's
please.
anonymous.
Even George. But anyway, so thank you, guys.
Good night,
And
all.
see
Thank you.
next time.
Thanks,
All
Tom.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Right.
Yeah.